The religion I have selected for this presentation is Buddhism. I have been interested in studying Buddhism since learning about it in high school because it has such a unique take on the afterlife and what it takes to get there. Buddhism emphasizes personal growth as the ultimate goal of one's life, or many lives through reincarnation. In his article regarding the basics of Buddhism, Sayadaw Fatila writes that one key aspect of this journey towards enlightenment is spiritual development. The influence of the spiritual aspect of growth in Buddhism makes the concept of death and dying an extremely important consideration. Spirituality is not only often used as an explanation for what happens after death, but also as a means to get there. Fatila also states that Buddha means awakened or enlightened one. In Buddhism, though there is not a specific deity to worship, development of the spirit is of the utmost importance to reach the ultimate goal of nirvana and escape the cycle of reincarnation. Buddhism teaches about the importance of recognizing and accepting the reality of death. In his book, Introduction to Tibetan Buddhism, John Powers quotes Dr. Richard Kalish as saying, "Death is blasphemous and pornographic. We react to it and its symbols in the same way that we react to pornography. We avoid it, we deny it exists, we avert our eyes from its presence. We protect little children from observing it and dodge their questions about it. We speak of it only in whispers. We consider it horrible, ugly, and grotesque." Powers writes that since its founding, Buddhism has taken a drastically different perspective. Buddhism has always emphasized the importance of understanding death and coming to terms with the ideas of death and dying. In the original story of the Buddha, it was the four sights which prompted him to seek enlightenment. These sights were one who was ill, one who was elderly, one who was deceased, and one who had renounced the world. The first three all demonstrate the preoccupation with death being the ultimate end, and the cause for a lot of the world's suffering. The Buddha's recognition of death motivated his understandings of the frivolity of worldly pleasures and desires, and therefore it was essentially attitudes about death that created Buddhism in the first place. Those who teach Buddhism strongly encourage meditation on the idea of death and dying. Resolving some of the anxieties and fears associated with death is seen as a good way to begin the path of relieving worldly concerns. Buddhism teaches that the afterlife cannot be reached until spiritual enlightenment has been achieved. Buddhists believe that after death, you are reincarnated to live out another life, not always as a human, depending upon your actions on the earth. In each of these lives, the goal is to achieve spiritual enlightenment, the goal which ultimately will release you from the cycle of rebirth into a state of nirvana, and officially the afterlife. Buddhists also teach the bardos of death, which are the stages of dying in the afterlife. Jay Donosky wrote an article on these stages, which include the bardo of death and the three bardos of the afterlife. The bardo of death is very brief and occurs in a person's very last moment before death, in which they have the opportunity to enter the final spiritual world without passing through the other stages of the afterlife. However, without extensive training in meditation and other spiritual practices, most people are said to not even notice whenever this moment occurs. In each bardo of the afterlife, there is another opportunity to move into the spiritual world. During the first bardo of the afterlife, you meet several spiritual figures and enlightened beings. This stage is said to be very frightening and overwhelming for the individual because it is an experience so like anything on earth, experiencing so many spiritual occurrences that are unlike any experiences you've had before. This stage can only be passed by clinging to images and lights that seem comforting to you. If you aren't able to pass this stage, you'll move into the second bardo of the afterlife. In this bardo, the individual experiences a variety of intense, dreamlike emotional states. This bardo may be escaped if the individual is well rehearsed in spiritual practices such as meditation or having connections to spiritual beings while on earth, to bring them to a more stable and conscious awareness. The third bardo is the stage of reincarnation, in which the person is pulled into a new body on earth to live out another life. If this stage is reached, the individual is still caught in the cycle of rebirth, and nirvana cannot be achieved. Buddhists have two main meditations surrounding death, described by P. Hodder in Death and Dying in the Tibetan Buddhist Tradition. The first is called the 9-round death meditation, which acknowledges and familiarizes the individual with uncertainty, yet the inevitability of death. This meditation contains the 3 roots, the 9 reasonings, and the 3 convictions. The first root is that death is certain. The 3 reasonings for this root are that there is no possible way to escape death. No one ever has. Not even Jesus, Buddha, etc. Of the current world population of over 7 billion people, almost none will be alive in 100 years' time. Life has a definite, inflexible limit, and each moment brings us closer to the finality of this life. We are dying from the moment we are born. Death comes in a moment, and time is unexpected. All that separates us from the next life is one breath. The second root is that the time of death is uncertain. This is explained by saying that the duration of our lifespan is uncertain. The young can die before the old, the healthy before the sick, etc. Even things that sustain life can kill us, for example, food and cars, property. The weakness and fragility of one's physical body contributes to life's uncertainty. There are many causes and circumstances that lead to death, but few that favor the sustenance of life. The third and final root is that the only thing that can help us at the time of death is our mental and spiritual development. Worldly possessions such as wealth, position, and money can't help. Relatives and friends can neither prevent death nor go with us, and even our own precious body is of no help to us. We have to leave it behind like a shell. The convictions are to practice the spiritual path and ripen our inner potential by cultivating positive mental qualities and abandoning disturbing mental qualities. To ripen our inner potential now without delay, and to ripen our inner potential purely without staining our efforts with attachment to worldly concerns. The second meditation is essentially a rehearsal of death, practicing its stages, because it's very important to understand what's going to occur. As Hodder puts it, this rehearsal takes away the feelings of the unknown, thus allowing us to die skillfully. The understanding of death and dying is incredibly important to the religion of Buddhism. Without conquering the fear of death, you can never achieve the ultimate goal of nirvana and escaping reincarnation. I think the teachings of comfort surrounding death in Buddhism could not only be helpful to their spiritual beliefs, but similar understandings could be beneficial for everyone.